In this presentation, we are going to be going over the S.P.A.R model, which stands for stability, plasticity, adaptability, and resilience. So as Micah went over previously, where kind of S.P.A.R fits in how we're approaching health is more on the translational side. So just a brief recap. Health is the relationship between the individual and an environment in a way that promotes lifespan and flourishing, recognized by the domains of stability, plasticity, adaptability, and resilience is really the lens that we are viewing health. So environment is really of first importance. Secondarily are the tools, technology, medicines, thoughts, beliefs, etc., that really assist the S.P.A.R process. The objective of the relationship between the individual and the environment is person-specific, as we'll get into later on when we look at each of the constructs of S.P.A.R. Capturing this relationship between the individual and the environment is an abstraction. So it really does necessitate multiple domains, and they are all interrelated, as we'll see. So the S.P.A.R constructs directly contribute to health span and lifespan by facilitating the body's capacity to maintain, balance, grow, adjust, and recover, which are key for survival and flourishing in dynamic environments that we're all exposed to various degrees and various conditions. We feel that S.P.A.R is superior because it captures the fluidity and the complexity of the human experience and its relationship with health. Really allows for continuous evaluation, unlike static data-driven methods that may become outdated or even too narrowly focused to capture the true complexity of health over time. S.P.A.R, stability, resilience, plasticity, and adaptability cover all dimensions of health by addressing how well an individual maintains balance, recovers from disruptions, adapts to new situations, and anticipates future needs. So going over the first construct, stability, this is really defined as the ability of a system to maintain its structure and function over time in the face of external disturbances or changes. So here we see in this schematic, a health configuration is shown as this essentially a sphere sitting in this mound where we have a basis of attraction, various anchors that are holding this health configuration in this spot, right? If we're moving along the x-axis you see at the bottom, we're getting into different health states. So to have a more stable health configuration, we want to have a stronger attracting forces for the basin, essentially. So here we see in the schematic to the right, we essentially have a deeper mound or reservoir to handle different factors that might shift our health state. So it's going to be more difficult to shift this health configuration. It's going to be more stable. In a healthy state, stability helps ensure the preservation of essential biological functions, reducing the likelihood of acute health crisis or chronic disease onset. P in S.P.A.R, plasticity, is about reactive change. It refers to the immediate changes that occur in response to specific stimuli or stressors. This does not, however, mean that the individual is necessarily adapted for the same situation in the future. It's really the capacity to adjust to stimulus at any given time. And this is really a prerequisite for adaptation, which we'll get into on the next few slides. So adaptability is more about proactive change. It refers to the long-term adjustments that occur as a result of ongoing or anticipated conditions. So here, repeated plasticity is important, as we see in the schematic viewing different health configurations over time. So after repeated stimulus, the individual may be more adapted for future stimulus. So we can think about this perhaps more simplistically, looking at this simple line graph. On the y-axis, we see the state of being, and on the x-axis, we see imposed stress. So we have, obviously, with the red line denoting the initial state, if we impose some type of stress on the system, we have some type of elasticity or flexibility where if we're still in that range, we're not meeting maximal flexibility, for instance, denoted by the green line, we can be pretty certain that we're going to return to the initial state of being. However, if we do exceed that elastic threshold, we have what's called in ecology a tipping point. So with plasticity, we do have a range of possibilities in terms of shifting from baseline from imposed stress. And this is based on both the temporal nature of how quickly this is happening, as well as the range, the latitude that we have to handle that. If someone who has high plasticity, in an exercise case, they might really adapt well to new forms of exercise. So for instance, if they had a very high baseline for exercise, they might have a better capacity for long distance running, strength training, yoga, etc. So plasticity also has to be viewed as the ability to extend beyond baseline based on varying forms of stress, making temporal changes that can really help accommodate disruption. If someone doesn't have that same initial state, being able to be very flexible with these different modes of exercise, they may incur some disruption and overcome a tipping point where they can actually shift their health configuration to an entirely new state. So this is really important when we consider response across different individuals. We know that plasticity in particular is highly variable, showing tremendous inter-individual differences. So we can form different elastic ranges for all sorts of people. So again, going back to the example of exercise, we know that many people respond very differently in terms of the initial disruption and then also the time course that it's occurring, how quickly they can adapt. Or for instance, some people may not adapt very well. They may be better suited for different forms of exercise. Moving to adaptability, this is essentially the ability to change baseline states upon disruption. Again, looking at the example of exercise, we generally view that stress as positive or eustress, seeing that over time we have an adaptation occurring, shifting someone to generally a more health-associated state, a health state. Adaptability helps us ensure that as the environment changes, whether it's related to exercise, as we're using our example, or it could be climate, social conditions, or even internal biological shifts, the individual can modify their approach to survive and thrive. So there's two very important elements when we consider adaptability. Obviously, there is the state of being, right? Kind of going back to what we were discussing with stability, but also the rate of change, okay? So we have this ability to change. Again, it's very person specific. And then obviously how quickly we can have that change. As we see with the graph there in the middle on the slide, we're going to have these disruptions occur over time as we have exercise bouts. And eventually we may break a threshold here, a tipping point where we shift into a completely different state. So the last construct of S.P.A.R is denoting resilience. And this is the ability to return to the original state after a disturbance. Again, you see how these are all kind of interrelated. So going back to our mound schematic, we have health configuration in the basin of attraction. We impose stress and we shift that configuration. So we do have, depending on the person, some latitude in how much we can shift based on that stress before going to a tipping point, overcoming that peak at the top. If we don't reach that threshold, then we're going to, over time, return back to our basis of attraction. So important for resilience, we kind of been talking about health, right? We generally view a highly resilient person or a highly resilient domain if we're looking at, say, something specific like liver health, neurocognitive health, or even, say, behavioral health as a good thing. However, that's not always the case. And this is very important when we consider health states, particularly when we're looking at disease. I think in the case of behavior, this is pretty relatable. If we know a depressed person, their baseline state may be just continual depression. We may have, say, an intervention. Maybe the person is getting some therapy or whatever. Based on that stimulus, they may have what we would term a positive disruption, where now they're what we would consider, a good mental health state. However, over time, as we don't invoke that stimulus, they will have a tendency to return back to their baseline depressed state. So high resilience can also occur in disease states, and it really needs to be addressed in our health models because those are going to be more difficult cases. Say we're looking at someone that has IBS or IBD or something like that in the gastrointestinal tract. We're looking at the gastrointestinal microbiome. That's a very resilient microecology. So when we're going in and trying to shift that configuration, we have to deal with high resilience. And we can see this also in our own physiology, particularly when we're looking at different organ systems. So incorporating resilience, incorporating the S.P.A.R model is really a superior way to approach health. And, this has several different components to it that we feel really give it the edge when using it as a lens for health. It focuses on the ongoing fluid processes that define how an individual's body and mind adjust to external conditions. So health is not just a static state, but a continuous interaction where S.P.A.R enable an individual to thrive over time. S.P.A.R's framework evolves alongside the person's health. It can shift as new information and experiences are integrated into a person's biological and mental systems. So unlike a static test, such as a methylation test that I brought up earlier, which really measures epigenetic markers at a specific point in time, S.P.A.R provides a continual adaptive model that can adjust with new findings or individual changes over time. It's also multidimensional. It incorporates different dimensions of health, whether it be physical, mental, social, spiritual, contextual, holistic, etc., which provide a more comprehensive view of lifespan and health span. Each domain offers unique data that feeds into the overarching S.P.A.R model, and these data points are interpreted in light of their dynamic interaction. We feel that this is actually very long-lasting because it is inherently robust, because it doesn't just rely solely on specific biological markers. Instead, it reflects the dynamic processes of the body, which remain relevant regardless of specific health trends or biomarkers that might fall in, and as we commonly know, out of favor. A methylation test, while providing valuable data, is also susceptible to becoming outdated if future research challenges its correlations with lifespan and health outcomes. S.P.A.R, by contrast, translates the living system's interaction with its environment in real time, making it more versatile and adaptable as health science advances. And we really want it to advance. We're open to change, and we're open to adapting our current model with new technologies. So with that, we'll end this presentation.